Moments of indulgence. I am lactose intolerant, and I know I should keep an eye on my cholesterol. But neither of these factors stop me from picking at a cheese board or ordering ice cream for dessert. I'm aware while I'm eating that my choices are not benefiting future me. I never feel good after, yet I keep repeating the cycle. I don't know why I keep doing it. I have them swear that I will stop. No more cheese, I say to myself, or I will stay away from sugar. But somehow, even want what I shouldn't have, sometimes even more. I'm not the only one who struggles with this. When I shared my problems with this decision-making process on Twitter, several users replied with their despite being better off staying away from them. Zach Hoying wrote that even though he knows he's susceptible to goat, he'd still indulge in red wine, rich foods, and beer. I just deal with the gout attacks from time to time. Like me, Victoria M. Walker refuses to give up diary, and A.C.H. Holiday replied that they have cysts and aren't supposed to drink coffee, but sometimes they still do because it provides comfort. Seeing the Devlin added that food helps to get through the slog of the daily grind. Another user, Pablo Paycheck, said they choose to eat foods that maybe they shouldn't because YOLO, meaning because you only live once. Yep. Why do we keep choosing foods that we shouldn't? The answer isn't clear-cut. There are a variety of reasons we choose to eat what we eat that depend on the individual. There are circumstances and other factors. There's a spectrum when it comes to healthfulness and food. All foods can fit into a healthy diet, says David Creel, a psychologist and registered dietitian with Cleveland Clinic's Bariatric and Metabolic Institute in the U.S. But there are less healthy foods that we choose to consume even when we can foresee negative consequences, such as stomach aches or higher cholesterol levels down the line. Some people actually think about it. They might perform a mental cost-benefit analysis. What am I going to get from this? What does it cost me? And they make a decision based on that, Creel says. A lot of people, they just kind of do what's familiar to them, and they don't do it with a lot of thought, says David Creel. But that's not how everyone's brain works. For others, habit plays into the decisions they make. A lot of people, they just kind of do what's familiar to them, and they don't do it with a lot of thought. What happens in the brain when we choose to eat something? Two areas are stimulated during the eating process. We know from people who do brain research that there tends to be two different drivers. Liking food when we eat it, our brain responds, and we can see that through imaging. And there's also a warning piece. Crow says, both are important. If someone is having a craving, that's a warning experience. It's similar to when we eat it. Our brain responds, and we can see that through imaging. That's a warning experience. It's similar to when someone who smokes is asked if they like to smoke. They may not like it, but they do crave a cigarette. Certain emotional states may cause you to crave specific foods too. The liking experience comes after eating or experiencing a food. Sometimes liking and wanting feed into each other, but they happen in different areas of the brain. Drill explains the sociology of how we decide what we want to eat is complex. It also varies based on who is making the choices. So what are some of the factors that play into the way we choose food if we aren't actively accessing what the outcome of our eating decisions will be? Foods that taste good and seem fun are appealing to us. The reason that we consume those things that we shouldn't, for whatever reason, is typically driven by taste or flavor, says Charles Spence, a professor of experimental psychology at the University of Oxford in England. It's hard to resist the temptation of the sugar, or the salt, or of the fat. And part of why foods taste good is based on the associations we make with those foods. I ask my patients a lot, what would you describe as a fun food? And the reason that we consume those things that we shouldn't is typically driven by taste or flavor. Again, things like pizza or ice cream or cake, they come up, Creel says. Another association might be how comfort foods are identified. Creel associates homemade buttermilk biscuits with his grandmother. Conditioning from our upbringing contributes to how we associate food and when we want it. So it might not even be the food's flavor or taste that appeals to us as much as the association we make with the food, Creel says. Spence says that as humans, we tend to prioritize what happens in the present over anything likely to happen in the future. People might be drawn more to the reward of those typically great tasting foods in the moment. He explains how we choose what we consume also has to do with human history and evolution. According to Spence, the human brain, he says, will pay more attention to foods that are energy dense, with extra attention to those high in fat. Or evolved he supposes, to find those food attractive because at one point they were essential to survival. Long ago, perhaps people were struggling to find sufficient food. But now, many of us live in a food-rich environment. Spence continues, explaining that some of the foods are more energy dense than we actually need now. The brain evolved for feeding. Foraging and fornicating, he says, noting we all find it hard to override what he calls ancient urges. Ancient urges. How do we change our decision-making process if we aren't happy with the choices we've been making? Creel says he often encourages patients he sees to pause before taking action and consider their choice, not to see anything as forbidden, but as two options that could have different outcomes. If you tell yourself, I should have one thing, and I shouldn't have another thing, it kind of sets up to not do well, he explains. For example, if we say to ourselves, I should have an apple, and I should not have cake, you either eat the apple and feel like you missed out on the cake, or eat the cake and feel guilty because you didn't eat the apple. But if you look at these choices while weighing the outcomes, your actions are likely to be different. Changing the shoulds to coulds will give you freedom to making the decision while removing any guilt, Creel says. So if you could have an apple, or you could have cake, your decision might look more like this. You should have an apple. Your decision might look more like this. You could choose to eat an apple that you think you will enjoy, or you could choose to enjoy the cake because it's your favorite kind. And you don't have guilt because you consciously came to the conclusion that eating the cake was worth it. Making mindful decisions doesn't just eliminate guilt. Creel says that it may also lead you to avoid less healthy choices. Being mindful can enhance the enjoyment of all kinds of foods, he said. I think it can really help on both sides of the equation. It can be helpful to not overconsume unhealthy foods and can help promote the consumption of healthier foods.